Straight Lines with Elizabeth Kayser on News Talk STL.
Hey, welcome back. You're listening to Straight Lines with Elizabeth Kayser every Sunday evenings at 8 p.m. And boy, do we have a lineup for you. First, I want to introduce, and he's going to go on here in a few minutes, but Dr. Joseph Hibbeln. His last name is Hibbeln, B as in boy. And you think, well, Hibbeln, that doesn't sound like, phonetically, it doesn't make any sense. But when I first met him, he's amazing. He said, just think about dribbling a basketball. That's how you say my last name, Dribbling Hibbeln. Dr. Joseph Hibbeln, he is actually a captain. He's a psychiatrist. He's an MD. He actually serves on one of the CDC panels, and we're going to be talking about the human brain and the healthy cognitive functionality of the human brain and how the omega-3 and 6 dictates the health of the human brain and how that has been long overlooked for decades. And thank God it's starting to come to the surface now, because we've got a different guard at the White House under RFK and Maha. And welcome, Dr. Hibbeln.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. His last name is, I want to kind of point this out, it's kind of interesting, Hibbeln. And when I first had the privilege of meeting Dr. Hibbeln, I didn't know how to pronounce that, because phonetically it would be Hibbeln. It just didn't roll off the tongue very naturally. And he said, just pretend like you're dribbling a basketball. It's dribbling Hibbeln. I said, thank God. That's so much easier. Dr. Joseph Hibbeln, I cannot wait to talk about what your expertise is in. And I'm fascinated by the brain. I've been fascinated by the brain probably my entire life, actually. I mean, I was the nerd that would read about neuroplasticity probably 12 years ago. And nobody even knew what the word was. Like, what are you doing? And it's like, and I had these magazines and I would watch documentaries when they became available, just about how the brain worked. And, I've always had a passion in health, and I think if I ever did pursue my medical degree, which I ended up being a lawyer instead, but had I pursued my medical degree, I would have been all about the brain. There is no doubt. So I'm so excited that you're with us this evening. You have taught me so much. In fact, just a few days ago, I was driving to the Capitol to have a few meetings in Jefferson City. And Dr. Hibbeln was so gracious. He actually kept me entertained for 35 minutes, and we had a wonderful conversation. I'm a smarter person this evening because of the conversation we had. So let's talk about what you have learned regarding the brain and the omega-3s and the 6 ratio, balance, EPA, DHA, all of that, and how it affects the brain. And, I'm just going to give you just a little bit of backdrop before we get into all of his beautiful expertise. But, we spend billions on mental health, billions on violence prevention and addiction. And yet, and I'm sure everybody can agree with this, rates of depression and aggression and suicide, homicide, violence remain stubbornly high. And I'm sure some would argue, depending on the statistics, it's gotten even worse. So what if a part of that explanation isn't psychological, but it's biochemical? So, Dr. Hibbeln, tell us about what you've been doing with the brain and how long you've been doing this, studying the brain.
First, thank you for this honor of presenting my data from more than 35 years of research and publications. The fundamental issue is this: all consciousness and human civilization, all symbolism, all religion and consciousness come from the brain. What is so remarkable is that the brain is mostly fat, lipids. And they're not just sort of like adipose lipids in your stomach. They are biochemically critical nutrients. You talked about neuroplasticity, which would be growing new neurons like a tree's branches. Well, the tree needs food to create neuroplasticity. And if the neurons are starving and you don't have the right nutrients to make those synapses, you don't learn anything. You don't grow because your brain can't change. And it's not only learning intellectually, it's learning emotionally. Because the circuits of when you see something not only go to your frontal cortex and your logic, more importantly, it circulates through your emotional center of your brain and your history. So if you want to learn something new, if you want to change your behavior, you need to eat those fatty acids. And if you're deficient in the fatty acids, the anger parts of the brain get activated, and the irritability parts of the brain get activated. When you haven't slept enough, or it's, about time for a meal, you just have that nasty, irritable edge.
Angst, yes.
What if that is happening not only all the time for you, but all the time for your relationship, for your kids, for your block, for your community? If everyone is notched up to be predisposed to be aggressive or angry or depressed, then it becomes a cultural norm. Mm-hmm. And all of the psychological things and the communications have to go through our brain, because that's the center of who we are. And if that dial is tuned towards aggression because of our diet and because of our fatty acids through the food supply, then literally all of civilization and common interactions are dialed to aggression and homicide.
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick, and this is expounding on what you're feeding me, Dr. Hiblin. But we've learned a long time ago, and I love what you just said. The brain is fat, and I love how you underscored the word fat, because I hope that everybody listening is like thinking, that's not what we've been taught. Yeah, we've been taught wrong, haven't we, for years and years and years. And I knew the brain was lipid, or that's what I've learned. I'm not a doctor, but like 98%, something very, very high, the brain is lipid. So it didn't make any sense to me why we'd be taking statins and going on no-fat, low-fat diets when the brain is 98% lipid. It makes no sense. And it's incredible, these discoveries for people like you, these experts like you that are saying, you guys are doing it wrong. I mean, I love this. And something else that you just referred to about how the neuroplasticity of the brain and how it works and how it needs food, like the roots of a tree. I love that parallel and that metaphor. I often talk about the brain. It's like this fluidity of thought. And it's a continuum. It's not, input, output, input. It's not that. It's fluidity of thought. And it goes into so many of the complexities, almost like a labyrinth, a Rubik's Cube, but a labyrinth of everything that's concurrent and simultaneous and contemporaneous, everything happening at the same time. And it's just that beautiful fluidity of thought. And before we get into the specifics, I do want to mention to the audience, Dr. Hiblin has really focused on something that we all are going to be hearing a lot of. And we've started to hear a lot of it from the government, federal government, MAHA, RFK, and the elimination or reduction of seed oils. Dr. Hiblin, tell us what the omega-6-3 balance is and what seed oils has to do with that.
I'll get back to that in a minute and flow to that. I think of consciousness as neurons singing. And there's a circuit from the frontal cortex into the emotional circuits, and the neurons have to sing, and they make music. And it's like an orchestra from all the parts of the brain that have to work together. So the fats in the brain, 20% of them are what are called essential, which means that we cannot get them from our diet. The body can't make them. We must get them from our diet. So literally, what you eat becomes your brain, becomes your consciousness, what you are. And my simple way of putting this is, if you eat junk foods with junk oils, you have a junk brain, and you have junk behaviors. And as a psychiatrist, I'd say that's why we unconsciously named them junk foods, because we have an intuitive understanding that they ain't right. So what are these fatty acids and lipids that have changed in the diet? The omega-3 fatty acids are the ones that are highly concentrated in the brain and you need to grow the synapses. And they have two roles. One, the structure and the growth of neurons. And number two, the omega-3s dampen inflammation. So if you have an inflammatory process outside of the brain, like gut dysbiosis with bad bacteria or an infection. You get sick, right? You get sick with a cold, you feel depressed and you feel down. Reason for that is the immune system is crossing over in the brain. You can accelerate that immune response by eating junk foods and junk oils, or you can dampen the immune response by eating the right amounts of omega-3s. What has changed in the last century with regards to seed oils and omega-6 fatty acids is the following. For all of the evolution of Homo sapiens and mammals, there was no soybean oil and no seed oils in our diet. None. 0% of calories.
The industrial diet.
Right?
Yes.
We evolved by the sea. Nervous systems evolved in the sea. That's why nervous systems exist. They have the omega-3 fatty acids. We looked at 987 different foods consumed from 1909 to 1999. Soybean oil as one food went from 0% of calories to 20% of all calories that everyone's consuming. And that has literally changed not only the immune system, it has changed what our brains are made of.
Jeez.
So instead of a brain making music from a finely tuned, instrument like a violin crafted, our brains are kind of like made out of plywood. And the music doesn't sound very good.
Wow.
Am I kind of clear on that?
You are. And this is absolutely fascinating. And not just soybean oil, but you've got the canola oil and the corn oils, and this all seeped into our diet. Now we refer to it as the industrial diet, don't we? Yes. And I want to emphasize to you that canola, corn, the other diets are less than 1% of the calories. Okay.
And soybean oil is 20%.
Oh, wow.
Of all the calories.
That's an order of magnitude. Had no idea.
Yeah, it's an order of magnitude. And then what we can do is one level of analysis, we would predict that as levels of the omega-6s rise over the last century, well, so should levels of, let's pick a very solid diagnosis, homicide death. The diagnosis doesn't change over the century, and it's counted by everyone. And increases in homicide closely parallel these dietary changes, not only in the US, but in 6 different countries as well. Gave a talk in Hungary, decided, look at this in Hungary. Hungary adopted seed oils about 20 years after we did.
Yeah.
And the rise in homicide
correlated
20 years later.
Wow.
Only with the change. So then knowing this, the omega, we can test this cross-country data and translate it into randomized placebo-controlled trials and put those omega-3s back to where they were in evolution, get rid of the omega-6s, and when we do so, we can reduce aggression by about 37% in randomized placebo-controlled trials. Not only one of them, but Adrian Rain published a lovely meta-analysis of more than 32 trials showing that this intervention works in adults and in kids. I also want to make a note that Stephen Schoenthaler, who was criticized for the Twinkie defense many years ago, really was a pioneer in this area. And if he did his work now, he'd be widely recognized. But back in the day, diet, what does that have to do with anything? Right. I want to give him some credit. But we have many levels of data, not only for homicide, but for major depression, for postpartum depression, and other psychiatric illnesses where we have not only the cross-century data, but we have cross-national data, which we've translated into randomized placebo-controlled trials and animal trials. So everything's concordant all the way down to the mechanisms.
That's amazing. And when you say aggression, and that is going to subsume and cover you've got homicides, of course, which is the epitome of aggression is killing somebody.
Easiest to count, right.
Right. And then less than that, of course, you've got domestic violence, you've got violence, you've got assault, you've got road rage, you've got, how many things that we can think of that go under aggression? And then in addition to just aggression, you've got all the other subtleties and subcategories, which is anxiety and depression and, oh my gosh, what, OCD, bipolar? Do we need to keep going on? This is all under the same category, right, as far as the brain?
It's all largely under the category of mental health.
Okay.
And it gives us an opportunity to call these potentially signs of omega-3 fatty acid either deficiency or insufficiency. When you don't get enough vitamin B12, most of the population is at higher risk of depression. Right?
Yes.
So we have a DRI for vitamin B12, how much you should take. We looked at 13 different illnesses across countries and calculated what would be the levels of omega-3 if you fall below. You kind of have an insufficient intake for a whole population. And then adjusted those for background omega-6 fatty acids as well.
So something you taught me, and I want to bring this out because it's just amazed me, all these epiphanies that you've given me, Dr. Hibbelin. The one thing we've been doing wrong, so many things we've been doing wrong, one is to talk about deficiency, but what you told me on a prior conversation before we got on the air tonight is we need a reference number. We need a DRI for omega-3, and most specifically, what omega-3 produces in the body, which has the effect on the brain, which is the EPA and DHA, correct?
Yes, and I want to emphasize that omega-3 fatty acids were first discovered for cardiovascular disease. In Inuits who were eating a lot of fish, they didn't have any cardiovascular death, very low levels.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any rheumatoid arthritis.
Wow.
And so the role of omega-3 fatty acids has been very well established for decades and is part of the American Heart Association's recommendation to eat fish no less than twice a week. So most of the scientists have thought about omega-3 fatty acids and nutrition below the neck. What's going on with heart disease? What's going on with obesity? I think the head is connected to the body.
I think so too. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Inextricably intertwined.
And so I think that when you're calculating a DRI, that is how much you need to take so you're not sufficient,
right.
We need to look at many other illnesses as well and risks than cardiovascular disease. And I contend that we can count very well some of the major illnesses causing distress and causing economic harm to our country. That is major depression, which exploded during COVID, which is homicide. We do have data on omega-3 fatty acids reducing domestic violence, which impacts kids.
Everything.
And
divorce
women.
Rates, everything.
Right. Why should we say the brain's disconnected from the body and not consider those horrific public health problems? So one of the things we've tried to do is to say, okay, if you add enough omega-3 fatty acids and say you can reduce depression by half, which is concordant with randomized placebo-controlled trials, well, how much money would you save?
Trillions.
Trillions, literally trillions.
Trillions, no doubt. So you got a met-economic factor here that should really move the needle. And so many levels of just socioeconomic, our culture, everything. This is just my theory. As much as I've been pouring into this, and I've had the privilege of talking to other doctors too that study the brain, like Dr. Michael Lewis, and he took the study, like you just said, Dr. Hibbelin, about the suicides. He was able to take, I don't know how many blood samples in the military, but showing there's a 62% increase in suicides if the brain doesn't have enough omega-3. And everything is converging, and it's all singing the same song. which I love how you talked about how the cells sing with each other as well. But I've always thought if you have a healthy brain, the body's going to follow. Now, there's going to be some schools of thought thinking, well, it's contemporaneous and it's simultaneous and there's axis and it goes both ways. And that's all true. But if you just look at it from a pragmatic point, not an anatomical or a medical point, if you have a healthy brain and you have that fluidity of thought and you have that resiliency, which is a beautiful, magical word, and you have a really good IQ and you're intelligent and you're reserved and you're discerning and you're able to separate, the irrelevant from the relevant, the wheat from the chaff, and just have that beautiful brain, you're going to have a healthy body. That's going to follow. You really are. I've not seen too many people who have had or have read about significant mental issues that have healthy bodies. That's a pragmatic view.
Absolutely correct. One of the critical connections between the body and the brain with regards to omega-3 fatty acids is inflammatory processes in the body.
Let's talk about that.
Gave you the example of how you feel badly after you get sick and you go down and lie down, but we have a big gut and there's a microbiome in the gut, and those bacteria, the species change when you eat the right amount of omega-3 fatty acids, and they become less inflammatory bacteria, and they change how the gut lining reacts to those bacteria, and it dampens the whole inflammatory process, linking the gut microbiome through inflammation going up to the brain. Since inflammation is a core accelerator of all diseases, it's critical to dampen this down.
Okay.
Incidentally, you talked about the stress and resilience. Those inflammatory processes, when they're out of control, also activate the stress axis, neuropeptide Y, CRH, and activating the whole sensitivity to stress and sensitivity to volatility, which then has that secondary feedback, raising blood pressure, raising distress, getting into somebody's face and getting hit. Yeah, which could eventually lead to homicide. I want you to talk about this. It's kind of a seesaw. It's like this perpetual balance, like a teeter-totter, if you can think about it. So omega-3, I'm going to say it in layman's terms, and then you help the audience explain it from a psychiatrist terms. But omega-3 is something that quiets down or quells this inflammatory signaling. And the signaling of the inflammatory process on omega-6, you need both. And the reason why, and I think you've said it so well, the reason why you have to have omega-6 is because the body needs that inflammation in order to heal. And it's not just from a pathogen. It's from stress, it's from oxidation, it's from getting in a fight with your kid, or your mom the other way around, or your boss, or having too much to do on your plate and you've got to constantly do this, prioritizing in life that we all do. And that stress, that could be a continuum nebulous stress in the brain, or it could be an acute stress because you just got in a car accident, or you just got, you just came down with pneumonia. That stress, that triggers the inflammatory process, which the body needs in order to trigger the efficacy of the immune system. But what is just as critical as the omega-3 then has to come down and say, quiet down, you've done your job. Correct. Right? You've done your job.
You need the right amount of inflammation at the right time for the right reason, and then you need to let it go away.
Let it go away. And it doesn't go away because people have chronic inflammation, a low level. And why? I want you, because we all learn by repetition. Why do most of us have a chronic level of inflammation?
So let me help you, I hope in simple terms, understand the connection and the role between the omega-6 fatty acids and the omega-3 fatty acids.
Yes.
The critical omega-3 fatty acids that we're talking about, everyone knows are coming from fish. That was the evolutionary one. And so those are long-chain fatty acids called EPA and DHA.
Okay.
So how can you raise your levels of EPA and DHA
in your tissues.
Eat fish.
Because tissue is the issue.
Tissue is the issue. You taught me.
Tissue is the issue.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you can measure it. So there's two ways you can raise the levels of omega-3 fatty acids in your blood, in your tissue. One that you just identified is that you eat more fish. And the second is that the body can convert plant-based omega-3 fatty acids into these fish-based omega-3 fatty acids, kind of like through a pipeline, like a tube.
Right.
And that's sort of a backup thing for evolution. And what happens is that when you have excessive omega-6 fatty acids from seed oils, it's like putting a ligature, it's like putting a rope around that tube and squeezing it down.
Yes.
So you can't get the conversion from the plant fat omega-3s.
I called that a tourniquet yesterday.
Fish-based, a tourniquet, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's more than 8-fold different. So my simple terminology is nix the 6.
Okay.
And you free the 3.
I love that. Nix the 6, free the 3.
And this has implications for our world's fisheries.
It does. It does. And and I don't want to get too much, I don't want to talk about products or anything in this show, but I will say that let me just say it really quickly, because I know our audience is thinking this, so I have to say it. Our audience is thinking, well, I'll just go out and get some fish stuff, little fish pills, fish tablets, fish supplements at Target, Walmart, wherever, Big Tail, Amazon. Does that work?
Largely, yes.
Okay.
There are a lot of very good omega-3 fatty acids that are extracted from fish.
Yes.
Fish oil as a total has a lot of different fats and lipids in it. So just unconcentrated fish oil is kind of dilute, and you need to take a lot of fish oil to get a lot of omega-3s.
Okay.
There's a lot of good products out there. First and foremost, look for a yellow USP or US Pure certified tag on those fish oils.
Okay.
That makes sure that they're not oxidized, that makes sure it's what's in the bottle says what it is.
Right.
We've talked about a nice company that pairs the sale of the omega-3 fatty acids with a blood test.
Yes.
You just prick your finger a little bit and put it on a piece of paper, and it can tell you what your tissue levels are.
And it gives you a ratio. Let's talk about ratios. We need to talk about ratios. Let's talk about those.
I think, the most important thing with the omega-6s is that it creates this ligature. So what's more important, in my opinion, than the ratios of all the omega-6 fatty acids, because there's a whole bunch of them, to all the omega-3s, the critical thing to dial in on is the blood levels of omega-3 fatty acids in your body, which you can, as I said, can either get by eating fish or fish oils, or you can nix the 6 and make the 3 for free.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think just to kind of sum it up, on these fish oils, like you said, we need to look for the USP label, but the key word is oxidized, because there's fish oils out there that are oxidized, that are inert, and they're not going to move the needle, and they're not going to be bioavailable in your body. They're inert. They oxidize. So it's really important.
Not inert.
Okay.
They're not inert.
Okay.
By the way, you can tell if a fish oil is oxidized by smelling it.
Oh, really?
If it smells like fish,
it's oxidized.
That's an oxidated fatty acid, which means the double bonds have been attacked by oxygen.
That's some good information. Yeah.
No, they're not inert.
Okay.
The oxidized fatty acids are actually pro-inflammatory.
Oh, it's worse than inert. I see your point.
It's worse than inert.
It's worse than inert. It can actually harm you if they're oxidized.
Correct.
That's really good to know. And
you can use your biochemical sensing device.
And I mean, Whole Foods, fish, and it's just, It's amazing, though, but there's such a critical balance because a lot of people say increase 3, and I love the little nix the 6, free the 3. It's hard to say that really fast, but there is this beautiful balance, and the ratios, like Dr. Hibbeln just said, there is companies out there. There is a company, the only one company that I know of, but you could do a little finger stick, and it'll give you your ratio, and the ratio is supposed to be, I think that's maybe 4-1, 3-1, 2-1, 1-1 is the best. And I'm sure anything below 5-1 is really good because that's rare. It's super rare unless you're eating a rare diet, which does not match the industrial diet today at all.
So Mediterranean diets
Yeah.
do not use seed oil omega-6 fatty acids. They're based on olive oil,
Okay.
which is an omega-1 fatty acid, and it does not put a ligature around the fatty acid conversion of the omega-3s.
Okay.
So those levels in Mediterranean diets are consistent with good health or consistent with elevating tissue levels. Mediterranean diet, eat olive oil and fish, is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it happened through evolution. Now there are also the ratio of 6s to 3s in soybean oil is about 9-1.
Wow. That's the wrong ratio. We do not want to target that.
That's the wrong ratio,
Yeah.
and it can lower your blood levels of omega-3s from about 8% of the fatty acids down to 1, almost tenfold.
Dr. Hibbeln,
so-
we've got about
And
30.
that's the ratio that swamps everything else.
We've
Yes,
got
ma'am.
about 30 seconds left, and I want you to say, and it's going to be difficult because this is such a fascinating thing we didn't have time to get to. But there was a study that you explained to me of pregnant women, and they did a longevity study of so many pregnant women, and it was a longevity where they looked at the children, and the children that were born of these pregnant women, you had pregnant women taking a good omega-3 diet, and then you had the control that did not. Can you tell us briefly what was found
I'll
out?
distill this for you.
Okay.
This is a study in England, the Alsbach study that enrolled 15,000 pregnant women and followed their kids throughout their lifetime.
That's statistically
And
relevant.
we asked the question of the policy at that time in the dietary guidelines was to tell women, don't eat fish because there's a theoretical level of mercury that might be harmful. That level was derived from women eating pilot whale in the Faroe Islands and really extrapolated. But worse than that, fish does not only contain mercury, fish contains these critical omega-3 fatty acids as other brain critical nutrients. So if you tell women to stop eating fish, you're starving their baby's brains
Right.
during a critical period of development.
Right.
So I tested the dietary advice,
Okay.
and when women obeyed the advice and stopped eating fish because of theoretical levels of mercury, they created a nutritional deficiency in their kids, and their kids doubled the risk of low IQ.
Neural
Double the
development.
risk of low
Double
IQ.
yes. I've got to have you back on. We're running out of time. That's a fascinating study. And the audience, I want to repeat this again, 15,000. That is statistically relevant. And you wonder, well, then why do we have this warning of there, pregnant women can't eat fish? Well, the EPA was saying, hey, maybe job preservation, right? We got to find some kind of toxicity. Forget the benefit. We're going to look for the toxicity because that's our job. That's what we do, which is very myopic at the expense of so many children who suffer neurodevelopment issues, lower IQ, and God knows how many other plethora of comorbidities that go with that. So thank you so much, Dr. Hibbeln. I've got to have you back on. This has been terrific. It's been fascinating. And I've been talking about omega-3s and 6s now for about 3 months. And so I've got to have you back on. This is fascinating. All right, Dr. Hibbeln, thank you so much. You have a wonderful week.
My great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Straight Lines with Elizabeth Kayser on News Talk STL.